Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast which celebrates the amazing achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm your host, Kerry Lush from the podcast station. I'm a freelance writer, podcast host and coach, and I'm a former ABC radio broadcaster. Join me each week as we meet some of the extraordinary women who call this region home. This is Riverland Women. In a time when many regional newspapers are shutting down across Australia, Sonia Fowler has defied the odds. From what began 18 months ago as a 16-page newsletter, Sonia is now publishing a fortnightly tabloid-style newspaper, the Waikerie and District News, and it continues to grow in popularity.
It's still a fledgling newspaper, and I think if I put the hard yards in now at the start, I think later on the rewards will come.
Throughout her career in publishing and newspapers, she's moved around Australia, but Sonia says the Riverland has always been home.
I was born in Renmark, true Riverlander, and through my father's work, our family moved to Waikerie, and that's where I did all of my schooling from kindergarten to primary school, high school, and then I was lucky enough to get an apprenticeship at the River News, the local Riverland West newspaper. And there I did a 4-year apprenticeship as a compositor, which is a trade that no longer exists due to the fact that computers have taken over. Basically, we composed pages, put pages together of articles and adverts, and we learned all about typography and basically how to lay out pages and design work. So journalism didn't really come into it, but that's one of the bonuses of living in the country. You actually get to be a bit of an all-rounder. So apart from learning the traditional trade of what they call hot metal, people may remember it was the old lead, molten lead, and the little characters that you used in printing. Well, that was actually my trade, and that's where the word compositor came from back in the old days. But since technology's improved with computers, compositors became dinosaurs like myself. So we had to, look for other avenues to use our trade, which obviously we can do with computers as well.
I certainly remember those days when I was at Stock Journal, so back in 2000 I started there, and so everything would get laid out and then we'd get the hard copies on our desk to go through and check our articles and headlines and pics and all of that sort of stuff. Certainly has changed a lot, hasn't it, in a really short period?
It did. So initially we were using a machinery that was photographic machinery to put the pages together, and that's where cold type paste up came from. And pretty much everything was done in a dark room and then run out of a processor, and then we would wax the back of the paper and lay it out and cut it and paste it. And I guess that's where cut and paste comes from when you're doing artwork on your computer today. It actually was when you cut out a bit of wording and pasted it onto a page, or physically did it, not just clicked your mouse here, there and everywhere. So a lot of what we have today is based on the old way, which is the manual way. So it was a really good grounding to learn the basics and learn about printing. I actually learned to run a printing press, so I did. I was a bit of an ink devil. I ended up with a lot of ink everywhere except where it should be. And learned all of the different machines that you had in the traditional sense from the old style presses. Today, everything, of course, in the printing world is digital, and it's a quicker process. I still think it was a good grounding to have done the traditional trade, put it that way. So that was in the 1980s after I left high school. So back then they still thought I was a tradesman. Today we're a tradesperson. But it's a very male-dominated industry back then, but it's certainly changed today due to technology.
So how long did you stay in that job for, in that role?
I think it was about 7 or 8 years at the River News. And I was getting itchy feet because obviously I hadn't lived anywhere else. I saw in the articles in the paper that I was putting into the paper that the editor wrote, my friends that I went to school with were going overseas. They were doing other things with their life. They'd moved away. And I thought, what's going on? Am I missing something here? I want to find out what else is out there. So I decided I would move on, and I went to Darwin, which I know people think, oh, that's a long way to go, but I had family there, relatives. So I ended up getting a job in a large printing firm, probably one of the biggest printers in Northern Australia, called Coleman's Printing, and I sold advertising, something I had never had to do when I was at the River News. So that was good. I was happy to put my hand to anything. And at that time, there weren't many jobs around. So I just said, yep, I'll take that job. And I worked there for about 7 years, making my way up through to sales manager. And I had a team of about 7 or 8 people. My sales area was absolutely huge. It was from Darwin to Katherine to Kakadu to Kununurra. So I did spend a lot of time on the road and visited some really interesting places, as you can imagine, from Western Australia to in the Kununurra area to Kakadu, down to Katherine and Alice Springs. And because the company I work for actually had 4 different printing companies. They have one in Alice Springs. So it was a really interesting time. And that was in the early 1990s. So Darwin, the Northern Territory, was still a very last frontier kind of place. But I also found there were a hell of a lot of opportunities there. So I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And after probably, I think I was there for about 10 years, decided there's a lot of military in Darwin. My partner was in the army up there and he was posted to Brisbane. So I said, why not? I'll go to Brisbane. So I went there. It's funny though, because I'd never driven in Brisbane and decided to get myself a job there in printing. And I got a job as a sales rep, yet I'd never driven in the place. So it was a real quick learning curve. But lucky for me, my sales manager at the printing firm was called Fergie's and it was the north side of Brisbane. He was a cabbie. So every time I had to go to somewhere like the Gold Coast to find a place, a client to go and visit, or anywhere around the city, I would say, Dennis, I need to go to such and such. What's the quickest, easiest way to get there? So it was really helpful because back then we didn't have GPSs. So it was all very manual once again.
Yeah. How long did you spend there?
I think I spent about 7 years there and then went back to Darwin because my family by then had all moved from the Riverland to Darwin. And I went back there, but I got my job back where I was and became a sales rep. So that was good, just slipping back into familiar territory without the pressure of being a sales manager and having to manage a team of sales reps in such a large area. Yeah, I think it wasn't too long after I ended up meeting my now husband. And yeah, we headed back to Brisbane. So I sort of yo-yoed a bit, just moving around. And then I had my own business in Brisbane with a graphic designer friend, and we started a business called the Paper Scissors Box Company. She designed all of these creations for invitations and wrapping paper and the letterheads and all of the different stationery, but all matching, and little bombonera boxes for children's ranges of stationery. And we distributed them through the Nextra News Agency chain, which back then was really big in Queensland. So that was a really interesting process. And of course, me with my print knowledge, I got them all printed and did a bit of print broking. And pretty much once we had that sewn up, I did a lot of print broking in Brisbane for different clients. And knowing the printing industry and all the different printing presses was really helpful because I knew what printer to go to that had the suitable printing presses to achieve the job that I needed. It was a really good time to be in Brisbane and meet so many different people from all the different printing companies, and it really helped my business with all that networking. Some of those people are still my friends today. And thank goodness for my start in Waikerie at the River News, where they did commercial printing after the newspapers out, and I learnt so much about the print trade. So I've pretty much carried that through my whole career.
So, but we're not in Brisbane now, we're in the Riverland. So how did you end up back here?
Okay, well, actually, I was dropping my husband at work when we were in Brisbane, and I had the Paper Scissors Box Company, and we were exhibiting it at the Brisbane Convention Centre, and it was 8 kilometres away from where we lived. And I dropped my husband at work, and I still had to go, a few more kilometres into the city. And pretty much I got stuck in traffic and it took me 1 hour to drive 8 kilometres. And I said to Brent, my husband, I rang him and he was at work. I said, this is crazy. I'm living in my car here. I'm on the road all the time and I haven't even got to the Brisbane Convention Centre. This is crazy. So anyway, we made a pact. Yeah, let's move back to South Australia. And my family had moved back as well to the Riverland. And yeah, it was really good to get out of the traffic. And when I came back, I thought Adelaide does not have traffic. If you're comparing it, Adelaide's traffic is a dream. We ended up moving to the Barossa. My dad's originally from the Barossa, and that's where I work, like you, Kerry, for Fairfax Media. And I got a job with the Barossa Herald as a journalist. So, as you probably worked out through what I've been telling you, I am not a journalist by trade. I'm a compositor, which doesn't exist. But I didn't go to university to become a journalist. I learnt on the job, and I was actually surrounded by some really good editors, which I picked up a lot of tips from and that used their experience. And I think that's really helped me a lot with people that have been in the journalism industry for such a long time. So I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the Barossa. Once again, met so many people through doing journalism and working at the newspaper. It was a really great company to work for, Fairfax Media, and doing the interesting stories that I did, predominantly wine stories, you could imagine, in the Barossa.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I did enjoy that. You may remember Fairfax changed their business model, and as a journalist, it became very digitized. So not only did we need to write a story and upload a story every hour or so to the website, we were given a iPhone, and we had to record news, selfie news, and we had to Twitter, we had to Facebook, we had to Instagram, and it was all, yeah, I think it got a bit much. And I sort of said, I think I'm a bit old for this. I might be looking for something else to do. And I was reading one of the papers in Gawler, and I saw an advert for the editor's role at the River News in Waikerie. And I was like, wow, okay. So I rang Brent, my husband, and I said to him, because he was working in the Barossa as well. And I said, look, there's a job for an editor at the River News in Waikerie. And, I'm really seriously thinking about applying for that. And he said, go for it. So I did. And I was really excited. So I had the interview and was successful with the job at the interview and took the role probably about a month later. So I really am a boomerang. I came back to where I started the role at the River News as editor, and it just seemed to be a natural progression for me because the people that I grew up with, they were still here. A lot of the things were still the same things. They progressed, but they hadn't. And so I thought, I feel like I'm home now, and yeah, just thoroughly enjoyed my role there.
So definitely a full circle moment then, back to where you started.
Absolutely. And that's why I call myself a boomerang, and I don't have a problem with saying that. To me, it's a good thing to go away and learn different things and meet different people and experience different things and then bring it back to, like Waikerie or your local community where you grew up, and you can bring a lot to the table. So that's what I feel I've been doing. So I'm really pleased with that.
But then I guess things probably didn't go to plan with the River News in the end.
No, well, I was there from 2016 to 2020. So then COVID kicked in, and the owners of the River News closed the River News. And I'd already left before then, but there was a big gap in the market then when the River News shut. It is a really sought after masthead, the River News, because it connects our community. And when it was closed, despite the fact that there was another Riverland paper, the locals continuously told me, Sonia, start a paper, you need to start a newspaper. And I'm like, no. I just thought, no, that's okay. They'll bring it back one day. But it really got desperate. There were just so many people talking to me about, we don't know what is going on in our town anymore. We just feel really disconnected. And, there's quite a big demographic of people in our community that aren't on Facebook. So they're not up with everything that goes on. And, I felt for them because there's nothing worse than feeling like you don't belong somewhere and you don't know what's going on. So I thought, what can I do? I need to do something. And I decided to do a little A4 newsletter. So I got my InDesign skills, the program that we use to design newspapers, and put together this little 16-page booklet, the A4 one, and had it printed and got it back to Waikerie, and I packed it up in my car. I only printed about 500 copies because I thought, I don't know how this will go. And
plus you would have been self-funding it, I guess.
I did self-fund it. The good thing is being, a long-term resident and a past resident of the district, I still had a lot of friends and acquaintances that had businesses. So I quickly did a shout out and said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this little newsletter thing. Can you support me with an ad? Oh, yeah, love to. Yep. And it was really incredible how they just all came out of the woodwork and placed ads, and that funded the printing. And I thought, oh, okay, that's I'm happy with that. That's excellent. I'm really pleased and thankful that I had a lot of support and from friends and business acquaintances and people I've met over the years with the paper, with the newsletter at that stage. I called it a newsletter. I remember the first edition. I put them in my car and I drove to Morgan and dropped them off, and the rest were in Waikerie. And by the time I'd been to Morgan and Cadell and Blanchetown and came back to Waikerie, and I'd had them in our local supermarket at Waikerie, they'd sold out. And I thought, And then I had people ringing me, oh, I didn't get a copy of your newsletter. I really want to get a copy. I'm thinking, I have none left. I've just distributed one. I think I've got one copy for myself. And it just took off. So I thought, okay. So I sold out. So, all right, I'm going to double the quantity this time. So I doubled it, still at the little A4 size. And same thing happened. And I was thinking, this is nuts. So I thought, it's getting too expensive to print on the nice white, bright paper in A4 on a sheet fed printing press. I think I'm going to have to go tabloid size, and I think I'm going to have to print on newsprint because obviously, as you know, that's the cheapest form of paper that you can print on. And yeah, I ended up going to the tabloid size, which is the size the paper is today, and printed more copies. And currently I'm printing them all at the Barossa Leader newspaper. I've known them for the people that own it. It's a family-owned business for a really long time, obviously from my days living in the Barossa and working with the Herald. The industry's pretty tight there. So they still print my paper every fortnight. And I've made it fortnight because I'm also a councillor with the Loxton Waikerie Council, and that's, requires a lot of time and effort as well. And also have developed a graphic design and print arm of my business. So I've developed something that's been really successful in a really short time. So I'm actually at the stage now where I'm looking to employ another person because I'm getting so many stories, which means I need more pages, which in turn means that I need more advertising. So I think for the first time since the life of my Waikerie and district newspaper, I might have to actually get on the phone and do some sales, which I'm really lucky I haven't had to do at this point. So I'm at the crossroads, Kerry.
Whether you stay where you are or whether you go bigger.
Yeah, I think I will be moving because currently I'm working from the front room of my house in Ramco. And as much as it's a beautiful view over the Ramco Lagoon, I need to have a presence in the town. And I need a place that's a bit more accessible as a business. So I will be moving into a shop in Waikerie in the next couple of months. And I'm really looking forward to that and expanding my team and maybe more pages in the paper. Probably stick to doing it fortnightly while I'm a counsellor. Believe me, fortnights come around really quickly. So it's a case of I just need to prioritise the time And yeah, I do still write the majority of the stories in the newspaper. But I have some wonderful contributors from all around the district that help me with writing columns and providing me with news. But we do have a very vibrant community here. In fact, I can't fit everything in each edition, so that's always a good sign, because a lot of friends of mine that are journalists in other newspapers have times where they're just struggling to find news. But I'm fortunate that I don't actually have that problem. I'm quite the opposite. So I'm pleased about that. It does make my job easier to not have to be searching for stories. So I guess the business has grown organically from that point of view with the news. So I'm happy with that.
Do you find it hard to balance? I guess you've got so many things on the go with being a counsellor and being involved in different organisations, plus having your own paper. I guess sometimes it's probably hard to report on things in some ways. And I guess also you'd have to be conscious about not burning the candle at both ends as well.
Yeah, look, there's a certain issue with conflict of interest. I try to avoid doing that, obviously, for lots of reasons. As a journalist, everything needs to be balanced. If there is an issue, you actually need to report on both sides of the story, because as we know, there's three sides to every story. So everything needs to be balanced. So yeah, that's something that I'm definitely aware of. And in regards to burning the candle at both ends, well, initially I did, and sometimes I still do. But I think pretty much I only started my very first newsletter in October 2022. So it's still a fledgling newspaper. And I think if I put the hard yards in now at the start, I think later on the rewards will come and I won't be working as many hours on it. And it's starting to happen now. But and that's because there's pretty much myself, and I have an offsider, Leanne Mickey. She's our layout artist, so she does a wonderful job. She lays out the whole paper. That's a big job in itself. So between us, we have a lot of fun, but we certainly do work hard. But we know down the track that it will be worth it, and we'll see the rewards, and also more staff. So I'm happy to work the hard yards at the start, but I think down the track it'll ease for sure.
And what do you do in downtime? What do you do for fun? Or is the newspaper part of your fun?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Kerry. Yes, I would have to say the newspaper is the fun bit. I mean, collating all the stories and, finding out what's going on, asking people questions and listening to people's stories. Everyone's got one. And we've got some intriguing people, and we've got people that have the most enormous stories. But if you don't ask questions, you just never hear about them. So I'm always on the lookout for unique stories of, people that have lived here that everybody knows, but we didn't know this certain thing about them, that they did this back in whatever, and they've got a story to tell. So it's certainly what I don't know if I call it downtime, but I guess it's something that I love doing. So it doesn't feel like a job, but certainly a lot of socializing and networking. And it's difficult to draw that line because I'm socializing on the weekends or after work, and then suddenly someone talks to me about a story. So then I'm working suddenly. So it all does blend into one, but certainly that's what I'm doing in my downtime, and that's socializing.
Yep. And do you get, I used to get all the time, oh, don't report on this, or don't do that, or is that going in the paper? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Some people get a bit worried when they see you there. Oh, this is off the record. With my camera. Oh, no, don't take my photo. But yeah, I think people understand that everyone likes seeing photos in the paper. So now and again, people need to have their photo in the paper. But yeah, I just think that really makes it, having lots of pics and things, and also for history purposes for the town. That's important as well. Just recording everything that happens in our community for our future generations.
is there a particular story or event or something that you've followed over the years that has really stood out to you?
I guess following the development of Waikerie CBD and Waikerie Riverfront, that's been an ongoing thing when I wasn't in council and when I was. So I guess the projects around the town, and also what our Rotary Club of Waikerie does. And my father was in Rotary here for many years. He's a past president and a Paul Harris Fellow. And now I'm a Rotarian. And knowing what he did, when I was growing up, And now being a Rotarian myself and looking at all of the great projects the club's done around the town, it's a real credit to them. The people there, dedicated, hardworking, and with a real focus on the community. That is something that I've probably followed all the way through the projects that they do for our community, and using community funds, which is brilliant. So that's probably one of the things that I love following, what Rotary's up to.
Talking about your role as a councillor with the Loxton Waikerie Council, how do you find that, and where do you see you making a difference there?
As a journalist sitting in the chamber, I guess because I grew up in Waikerie, when I came back to Waikerie as the editor of the River News, I would sit in the council and you would see things that were going on. You're thinking, oh, I think that needs, things you might not have agreed with, and things that you thought maybe weren't fair. And, due to a lack of numbers in the chamber for our district, things weren't going our way. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can make a difference in being basically a bum on a seat in the chamber to help support our end of the river in the council area. So I guess that's motivated me to nominate, and I did get quite a few people saying, no, you should, because obviously as a journalist you need to understand how councils run, and after attending lots and lots of council meetings over the years, it's not a simple process. It's quite involved, and I guess I had a head start as a journalist and decided, yep, I'm going to do it. It's a 4-year stint. It is probably my timing was a bit out, because at the same time I nominated and was successful in becoming a councillor, I started my newspaper. So it was a blaze of fire at the start, but I nailed it, and it's just a matter of time and a process, and we worked it out. So I hope I'm making a difference, and I enjoy the process. And obviously Waikerie looking quite good now. I'm not saying that's due to me or anything like that, but I just think that we have a bit more of a voice in the chamber now for our end of the river, and I think it's been good.
Is it a little bit different being in the inner circle now?
It's very different. Yeah, it's very easy sitting on the outside looking in, but when you're in the hot seat, despite the fact that as a journalist you still need to read minutes, and some of them, some of our agendas are 500 pages long, you definitely need to do that as a councillor as well. But there's all the extra meetings, and you also represent the council as a council rep on different committees as well. That's part of your job. So I'm also on the Waikerie District Historical Society Committee. I'm on the Waikerie Health Advisory Committee with our hospital, on the Community Assessment Panel Committee. There's all sorts of other roles that you take up as a councillor as part of the community, and report back to the council, and then report to that committee what the council's doing as well. So it works both ways. So yeah, it's busy, but obviously some of these committees only meet once a month or once a quarter, or at different times. So sometimes I have a clash. And sometimes I actually have a council meeting on a newspaper production week, which is a bit of a problem, but that just means I stay up a bit later at night to catch up. So, when people see me with a few more wrinkles under my eyes, that would be why. The late nights.
So what's next for Sonia and the Waikerie and District News and councillor and all the feathers you have in your cap?
Having my shop front in Waikerie, having an actual frontage where people can come in, very different to having your business running at home. Basically having a retail shop front at the end of the day, I guess. I think that will really improve as well. I'll have more of a presence, because believe it or not, despite the fact I have radio advertising and a Facebook page and I print the paper, there's still people in the community that may not be aware, because if you're not in the right circles or you're not looking in the right place, you can easily miss. So I think getting a shop front with a big sign on the front, I think that will help that problem. And that way I can share the news with a lot more people. And also I've outgrown my house. So I think it's time to move on and get a shop front. So I'm really looking forward to that and what that brings, particularly with my graphic design arm of the business as well. I've got 2 more years left in my term as a councillor. I'm not sure what will happen at the end of that. But in the meantime, I'm just really looking forward to probably working more on my business rather than in it. And I think that will happen organically as well once we move into a shop. So more of the same, I guess, Kerry, but just getting bigger and better.
Well, best of luck with it all, Sonia. Thank you so much for having a chat to me on Riverland Women.
You're welcome. Appreciate the thought. Thank you.
Thank you. You can follow Sonia at the Waikerie and District News on Facebook, and you can also follow Riverland Women and the podcast station on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening to Riverland Women.